Hi, my name is Blake McConnell, and I am one of the recipients of the 2012 Good and Plenty grant through Scottsdale Museum of Contemporary Art. The grant funded my project, Una Casa de Sonidos, which was a sound project where I worked with a group of undocumented, unaccompanied youth at a program that's part of Tumbleweed Center for Youth Development called Casa de Sonidos in the Phoenix area, teaching them different methods of creating and recording sounds, and then arranging those sounds as an interactive installation, which was then shown at Arizona State University. So in appreciation to the community that gave me this grant, I would like to share these same methods and show you all how to do them. Unfortunately, I could not invite the public to come to the workshops at Casa de Sueños to protect the identities of the youth that I was working with. But hopefully, you can enjoy and learn from these videos in the comfort of your own home or studio, garage, whatever the case may be, and produce a lot of similar work using the exact same techniques that we used in those workshops. So in this video, I'm going to show you the first part of this process, which is how to construct your very own contact microphone. And with this contact microphone, you'll be able to record lots of different sounds that you can use to create your own sound pieces, which we will continue and talk about more in the second video. So first, I'd like to show you what we're going to be making. This is a contact microphone. It's got a piezoelectric disc that's connected to it. It consists of a disc of copper here and a disc of quartz that, when pushed together, create a current that can then be translated to sound. And that is connected with coaxial cable, which was probably earlier in its life a VCR cable or something of that nature. And that's going to work totally fine. It's got little wires that will form the ground, which we connect to this black wire here. And then one wire that runs down the middle that we're going to connect to this red wire, which is the actual signal. And then on the other end, we've got what you are probably going to recognize, just a little stereo plug, although this is going to be a mono mic. I'll just go ahead and set the camera down and show you how we hook it up. So I have this little mini amp here from Radio Shack. They're pretty inexpensive and good to use to just check out what kind of sounds your microphone's making, and then also to put in line with whatever recording device you want to use on the other end. So I'm going to turn it up, and you have to be careful because you can get a lot of feedback, but I'll show you. Oh, there we go, a little feedback. So when I tap the mic, you can hear that it's actually making sounds, but it's not picking up anything that I'm saying through the air. So this is only going to pick up vibrations through solids, but as you can hear, it has kind of an interesting sonic quality to it as well. So I'll go ahead and leave this and give you a look at what we're going to be using to actually make our own contact mic. So in order to make all these parts, obviously we're going to have to do a little connecting. So in order to do that and make those connections permanent, we're actually going to solder them together. So this is solder. It's this substance that when we heat it up will actually let us bind the wires together in a way that's permanent, which is what we want. And in order to do that, we use a tool called a soldering iron. Here's the iron. It's pretty hot. To clean it, we can press it against this sponge here, which I've already wetted. We also have the steel wool, which we can use if it gets really gunky. We have a desoldering tool here, which can help us take solder off if we have put too much or put it in the wrong place. And here's our dial that gives us an indication of how hot the iron is, and I've set it to 350 degrees Celsius here, which is good. Your impulse may be to set it higher, but I will caution you with audio equipment, it's good to keep it pretty low, although you'll see this experiment leaves a lot of room for failure, which is what makes it good for beginners. We also have various cutting tools, and I know this seems like overkill, but trust me, you're going to want all of them. So we have this little clipper here. We have this one that has gauges that are specific to different American wire gauges. So that'll be good for stripping insulation off wires. And I always like to have a pair of little pinchers here. And those are excellent for pulling little wires out of things and just dealing with wires that are too small for your fat fingers like mine. So here's the cable that we're going to use. I know it's a little bit different, but the great thing about the contact mics is that you can use those cables that are just kind of hanging out that you don't really have any other use for, that just get tossed out or sent to Goodwill. This, I'm not sure what it was in its previous life, but I just wanted to show you that I've used all sorts of coaxial cable that prior to my using it was probably used to connect VCRs to TVs or your old cable box, something of that nature. So you think those are not useful anymore, and it's not true. They actually are. Here's the disc that we're going to be using. So you can order these from Jameco along with the plugs, and it's really easy and cheap to get the parts. You get a better deal if you order a lot of them. But if you just go to jameco.com and you search for 3.5 millimeter plugs and piezoelectric discs, I guarantee you will find them. Also, we have this, which is a digital multimeter. And this is not going to be 100% necessary, but you'll see later that it's pretty useful. It's going to let us troubleshoot what we put together. Here's the other end, and as you can see, I have these alligator clips. Those are also optional, also really, really nice to have. A third optional thing that you're going to need some variation on, but I have a fancier set of, is this heat shrink tubing, and that can be seen basically as equivalent to your good old friend, the electrical tape, which we're going to use both of those, but the heat shrink tubing obviously is going to be a little better. So finally, and this is really important, we have this fume hood here. So we're going to use lead-free solder, which sort of negates some of the negative aspects that will arise from us breathing in the fumes, but not all. So you really want to have a hood like this that will suck up all the fumes from the soldering iron. Okay, so that's an orientation. Let's begin. So the first thing you're going to want to do is prepare your cable. I've already cut the ends off this one. So once you do that and put them aside, if you feel like they're worth saving, then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to strip all the insulation off of your cable up to a point. You want to give yourself some room to make connections on this, but I would say probably 1.5 inches is going to suffice. So as you can see, there are some other wires kind of hanging out in here. And I'll go ahead and do this, and then you'll be able to get a better look. So as you can see, we've gone ahead and stripped the first part of the insulation off. And we have all these little copper wires hanging out here, and then we also have an insulated wire in the middle. And that is actually going to be our signal wire. So before we deal with these little wires that are going to be the ground, that are all around, let's go ahead and take that second little bit off of the signal wire. So you may have to try a couple times to get the right gauge. I like to start bigger and then work my way down. Sorry, I kind of hit the camera there. Let's try that again. So there we go, we've stripped off a little bit, and as you can see, we have this little bit of wire exposed here, and that's just what we want. And then we're going to take these wires and carefully braid them together. So then we basically have 2 wires here. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing to the other side, which, as you can see, I prepared the same way. And then once I've done that, then I am going to place this into my soldering station and go ahead and start making the connections. So as you can see here, I have all my pieces set up here to actually start making some connections. And on the right, we have the disc, which is being held here by our helping hands. On the left, I have the cable that we've just prepared. And we're eventually going to put these together and use our helping hands here to position them so we can solder them together. First, we need to do a couple things to get ready for that. First of all, I like to keep my solder on the left here, and it's going to keep sort of spooling out as we need it. And on the right, I have my iron, which is going to be handy for me. First of all, we're going to have to put a little bit of solder just on the tip here. And you can see we've got the iron pretty high in heat, so I'll just go ahead and turn that down. But you want just a little bead right on the tip, and that's going to help you put solder on the actual pieces prior to soldering. So we call this process tinning. So you want to, first of all, tin the iron. Then, second, you're going to actually put the iron to the piece that you're going to be soldering. And then I like to just get the piece hot and then run the solder on top. And then as you're doing that, sort of move the iron around. And it's good to avoid painting, I would say, because it's going to give you these little drops. Like you can see, I even put a little bit too much on there, so a little piece of it dropped off. But at the same time, a lot did stick to the wire, and as you can see here, we've got a nice covering that's going to help us out as we actually put them together. So do the same thing to the other wire, but note that I've already gone and put a little heat shrink tubing on there. So if you're going to go the heat shrink tubing route, you want to put that on first, because you're not going to be able to get it on once the two parts are put together. So let's go ahead and put a little bit, let's actually clean the tip. It's good to keep the tip nice and clean. You can probably hear it sizzling there off to the side. And then I'm going to put a little bit more solder on the tip there. And then position the iron just underneath, like I did before, and hold it there. And then once I touch the iron to the top, I can sort of move it back and forth just like I did before. And you're not going to be able to see it as well because this wire is just so small, but there's a nice covering there too. So the idea is that now, and I'm going to have to kind of bend this back out of shape to get it to touch the way that I want it to. Then we can solder these together without having to add solder, which is really, that's the idea. Is that we don't want to have too much. We don't want to have a glob there connecting it. We want it to be a nice, very evenly placed connection. So this is probably the trickiest part, is getting the wires to fit together how you need them to fit. And I'm not a big fan of twisting them together. You'll see people that do that. I want to have just a nice, straight, tight connection there. And in order to do that, you want to lay them just on top of each other, just like that. I don't know how well that's going to come out in the video, but they are just right on top of one another, right there. So then I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did before. I'm going to put a little, just a little bead of solder on the iron. And then I'm going to hold that just underneath where the wires are touching. And I should point out that you want to be as fast as you can possibly be with this in all cases. And I'm just going to put a little bit of extra, although I might not even need it. Then when I take this out, you'll be able to see that they are connected. And there might be a little bit more solder there than we really need, but for the most part, that is just perfect. That's exactly how we want it. So then I'll show you the heat shrink tubing just slides right on top. And that's also an advantage of not using too much solder, because if you have too much solder, then you'll have a knot there and you won't be able to get the tubing over. So that's a pretty snug fit. And then to make that permanent, all we have to do is just take a lighter and heat it up, and boom, there you go. So as you can see, I went ahead and finished this side here. So we have the contact microphone fully attached. We have our ends insulated. Now it's time to attach the plug. So as you can recall, I have the exact same setup on the other side. But in this case, I want to attach it to this plug here. So it has this sort of rigid plastic insulation here that I can simply unscrew off. And then underneath here, I have a couple different connections. So we have a left and a right stereo connection up here, and then everything else is the ground. And those correspond to these rings here. So the front two rings are the left and right. The tip is actually the left, middle is the right. Although, again, we're just going to be making a mono microphone, so it doesn't really matter. And then everything else down here is connected to the ground. So we're going to want to connect this to this. But first, I'm going to cut a little bit off this and put it on the cable, just like we did before. And I think that this will just run all the way through, because we're going to want to have this insulation on over the plug at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll solder them together. So I've taken the liberty here of going ahead and putting a little solder on everything so we can just go ahead and get started, because this part can be a little bit trickier. So first, I like to go ahead and just make sure all the cables are going to be the right length. All the little wires, rather, are going to be the right length, so that looks like it all fits together pretty well. And then I'm going to go ahead and solder the ground connection first. So that's going to be this part that comes out down here, connected to the wires that we had to braid. And I have a ton of solder here, so I really should not need one little bit more. But it's really important that you have everything set before you go, because again, this is a pretty easy soldering exercise for a beginner, but at the same time, you really don't want to apply too much heat. This is one of the few components on this, actually, these little connections to the side here, that you can fry pretty easily, and you really don't want to you don't want to put too much heat on it in general. So I'm gonna tin it, and then I'm just gonna touch it to these connections here and just hope that there's enough solder that they will just melt together, and you know what? They do. So I'm just gonna check that, and I know, you don't want to tug on it because you feel like it's really delicate, but you really need to, because you don't want it to come apart. So that seems pretty tight. The next thing I'm gonna do is solder these together, and you really want this part to be quick. So I have everything set how I need it to be, and we're just gonna touch the iron to it and just hope that everything comes together. Now, I know you think it's probably a little bit weird, and I'll show you a little bit more closely that we're connecting the same wire, which is the middle wire, the signal wire, to each of these two connections on the side. And the reason that we're doing that is because, again, we have a mono mic, so I want both the one signal to go to both of these terminals and to come out both of these at the end. It's not really a huge deal, but it's just going to make your life easier. So again, I'll go ahead and just clean off the tip, tin the iron just a little bit. Got a little bit too much on there. Let's be really, really parsimonious with the solder this time. And I'm going to do this one on the edge first, and I'm just going to be quick. I'm just going to hold it there, and as soon as I feel it start to catch, I'm just going to take the iron away and hope that magic happens. Which it did. So one side is connected, and then I'll reposition. And in this case, I'm even going to kind of hold the wire there with these pliers. That's where these really come in handy. And I'm again going to put just a little teeny bit of solder on there. I'm going to hold this wire down. And then that should be good, just like that. And there we go. Looks good. So I'll take it off, give it a nice little tug. Looks like everything's nice and tight. So it's at this point that you're going to want to do a little testing, and I know that you're anxious to just plug your mic in and hear what sounds it's going to produce. But really, a much better way to do that is with this multimeter that I told you about. And I'm going to put it on this setting down here that is basically a continuity test. So it's going to give us an audio signal when there's continuity. So that's to say, you know, if we cross swords here, so I have my positive lead and my negative lead, if I touch them together, then I should hear that sound. I should hear that obnoxious little beep. I'll go ahead and turn our fan off so you can hear that a little better. So voila, obnoxious beep. So then I'm going to check all the connections to make sure that they are how we want them to be before I proceed. So first I'm going to check the ground. So I'm going to take this alligator clip and connect it to the ground over here, which is the disc. And I'm going to take this lead and connect it to the ground on the plug, which is the middle ring, and we should hear a sound. And we do, which is good. So I'll go ahead and connect this side to the middle ring, because we're going to then go ahead and check this quartz. So we're going to have to just press it against the quartz. So we have continuity there, and then I'm going to check the tip as well. Great, we have continuity in all the places. Now, here's the part that a lot of people forget to do, but which is also important. There's also places where we don't want there to be continuity. So I'm going to press this side to the signal and this side to the ground, and we're not hearing anything, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to connect the black lead. Oh, and we do have continuity there, which is good. We want continuity there. But we want to test the ground with each of these rings that are the signal, because we don't want to have continuity there. That means we have a short circuit, and we don't have that. So again, remember, check what you don't want and what you do want. Great. So now we're ready to close this up. The first thing that I like to do is I like to isolate the signal from the ground. So what I will do in the plug is just take a little bit of this tape, and this is one of the few places that I use tape. I don't love using tape. It doesn't really hold up well over time. So I'll take it and cut, and you know, it's obviously a lot better if you have a pair of scissors to do this. But I'm just going to use what I have on hand, and I'm just going to take like a little piece of tape here and just put it in between the signal and the ground. And it should be pretty easy for me to do that. Just kind of shove that guy in there, and then I can even pull it through on the other side with the pliers. Just pull that through, and that is going to shield the ground from the signal, because when you have a short circuit, you will find that nothing works. And when you mash all this stuff together, it can come together in ways that you don't necessarily expect. So there we go. That's enough to satisfy me. Then we will just simply take this rigid plastic insulation and put it back over where it was before, twist it back on, and voila. So I went ahead and took the liberty of hooking everything back up here. As you can see, here is our finished contact microphone hooked into our trusty Radio Shack mini amp, and I'm gonna go ahead and cautiously turn this up, because you know you might get some feedback if you aren't a little cautious. And when I tap this, you can hear that it's good to go. We can have all sorts of interesting scraping sounds. But that I'm going to leave to the next video. So in our next lesson, I'm going to show you what you can do with this little thing and how you can use it to make amazing sounds. But thanks for watching, and hopefully you'll join us for the next lesson.